Forum Consultant Forum this evening, and it's a real pleasure to welcome our speakers this evening. Dr. Kristen Ann Rutter is going to speak first, and she's the Executive Director for the Cambridge Biomedical Campus Limited, and she's going to be followed by Dr. Hugo Ford, Consultant Oncologist and Divisional Director, to give us an update on the Cancer Hospital. And I'm hoping that Rob Hirschkull is going to be able to join us to give us an update on the Children's Hospital. He's not with us at present, I don't think, but hopefully by the time we get to that point, he will have been able to join us. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Kristen Ann, who's going to kindly speak first. And you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
My pleasure. Can everybody hear me and see the screen? Thanks, Ashley. Excellent. So I see many familiar faces. Today, I've been asked to very much focus on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus and CDC Limited in fitting with what's happening on our campus. But many of you also know that I play a role in Cambridge University Health Partners, which has a broader mission than just the physical development of the campus, but CBC is hosted within that and part of my role. So the Addenbrooke's Vision 2020 was really the start of this journey, and it has been in some ways incredibly successful. So if you think back, and it was initiated by Mary Archer, probably many of you might have been involved in some of the thinking at different points, but at that time the site was very much dominated by the hospital and the research campus. And if you then take a view of how that's evolved from this site here, which is now in this, it's come an awfully long way, particularly in the last 10 years with the rebuilding of the Laboratory of Molecular Biology, the new Geoffrey Turin Cancer Research Institutes, obviously the arrival of AstraZeneca, Royal Papworth, ABCAM, the University of Cambridge Animal Facility. And you will, for those who've gone to the edge of the campus, will have seen AstraZeneca are now building out this plot as well. And so that has brought a lot of advantages. It's brought new collaborations. It's brought the co-location of more research and industry partners with our healthcare. But it's also, I think people had learned some lessons from things that didn't work quite so well along the way. Again, whether things were economically deliverable, for example, the Forum project, how you create real sense of space. And one of the challenges we have on this campus is that there is no, it's not a single, there's no owner of it, and there hasn't been a sort of strategic voice beyond the hospital for that. And so back at the start of just before the pandemic, the different occupiers on the campus came forward and said, well, what's our vision for 2050? Where do we want to take this campus? And how do we learn the lessons of what's worked well over the last 20 years, but also some of the things we want to improve on? And I think the vision was developed by the occupiers of the campus, and it's truly now a mix of healthcare. When I have people come down from whether it's government or just our neighbours and residents, I say it's the physical embodiment of sort of the UK life science strategy of co-locating for the mutual benefit, research, both industrial and academic, with the delivery of healthcare. But the other thing we have to remember is it's not a campus in isolation. It is part of a broader ecosystem of the South Cambridge campuses, so the Wellcome Genome Campus and the Babraham, down the road, Granta Park, but also the West Cambridge collaborations with the physical sciences at the university, and then the links up to Peterborough and the north, and then down to London. For example, we have an event on cell and gene therapy happening, and bringing in the Stevenage Biomedical Catalyst into that event. And so when the vision was developed, it wasn't just, it did actually also think about what's the role of the campus in this broader ecosystem, what can only be located on this campus, what should be located, how does it complement, how do we manage transport between the different locations. So it is mainly about the campus, but it's also about the campus in the context of this ecosystem. And then obviously physical infrastructure has to follow. Well, what is it we're trying to do? And so what is it that we want to be doing on the campus? And that is really improving lives. I hope that's something many on the phone can relate to. That's at the heart of the circle. By increasing global health, because the work that's done on the campus has impact globally, but with our local population at the centre, through discovering breakthrough insights, to demonstrating the value of those discoveries. You could call that scaling, improving, and then delivering both health, social and economic impact. And so whatever we do physically on the campus needs to support those broad aims. Just a sense, again, things that probably many of you are aware of, but we are, as an ecosystem, very strong in all of those three pillars originally, and some of the, many ways of measuring them, but some of the metrics that one might look at in discovery, significant prizes, Nobel prizes are pulled out on this slide, 27 to Cambridge affiliates of medicine, publications, but also patent applications, highest in the UK when done by cities. But it isn't just, it's about those underlying discoveries then turning into impact, many different ways that happens. But again, some pretty impressive figures on the slide in terms of the world's, 6 of the world's top 10 drugs developed in this cluster, 90% of the total world's DNA sequencing, starting from this Lexa technology, but then also not just scaling those things, but actually having strong outcomes, particularly for our local community, the amazing outcomes that the hospital has had in all specialties, but particularly during COVID. Royal Papworth getting the first hospital outstanding across all categories. So very strong healthcare, but also contributing to economic growth in the area. And so that led to that vision of what we're trying to achieve in terms of purpose, then led to the development of a physical vision, saying that we wanted to be globally leading, locally rooted, the preferred destination for life sciences, where research, commercialization and application come together to create innovation at the heart of a local economy. And there are the 2050 vision for the CDC is available on a website. It went through a public consultation, I think, and it got strong support and feedback. I think one of the feedbacks that was heard very strongly was it didn't put a sufficient emphasis on sustainability. And so that's something we're very much thinking about now as we come on to the next stage of that, which is moving from a vision to what is the place actually going to look like. And I'm going to play a brief video. I'm not going to play all of this, but again, this is available on YouTube. This is what's happening now is all the partners on the campus are coming together to turn that vision into, well, what does that mean in terms of where things are, how space is used, what we have in different spaces. And I'll just give you a flavor of that and what CDC is starting to achieve by playing you just a couple of minutes of this movie. Can you hear this, by the way?
Very difficult to change that infrastructure. So getting that infrastructure right from the very taking some greenfield land and converting that into high quality neighbourhoods with employment is necessary, I believe. The question is, how do we do it well? How do we do it in a way that is respectful to nature and actually respectful to people? Just to humanise what we've already got, create a gorgeous park in there with a cafe, places for people to sit and enjoy, to come out of those buildings, meet one another. Imagine the creativity that occurs when you get people from those different organisations and different disciplines coming together in that informal way. When you're planning a new settlement, particularly if you can take a 20 to 30 year perspective, there's really no reason why you can't get that right. But you're manifestly world class in your core business, your core enterprise, and I see absolutely no reason why you can't be world class in regard to what happens next with this physical place, on behalf of the people that work here, the people that might live here in the future, and setting your aspirations high enough, and applying the rigor that you apply in your everyday work to the way that you think about place and the future and what kind of environment this could be. It is an important piece of work, and there's no time like today to get on with it.
So you'd have seen in there very briefly, I don't know if you clocked them, a new organisation has been formed called CBC Limited. It has the 3 hospitals, the university, the Laboratory of Molecular Biology, AstraZeneca and Abcam. And that organisation has 4 objectives. One is to secure the future of the campus with appropriate land allocation and legal arrangements. So there is land adjacent to the campus, which the landowners and developers are bringing forward. And as CBC Limited, we want to make sure that that land is brought forward for the benefit of the campus and not for other things that we don't want to see there. And how can it help to address some of the deficits we've got on the campus, potentially provide affordable housing for some of our employees on the campus. So how do we work with local planning authorities, but also negotiate legal arrangements with those landowners to make sure that any land that is developed on is developed for the benefit of the CBC. Second objective is to enliven and improve the existing campus environment and facilitate the interaction between occupiers. The third is there is development that needs to happen on the campus now. Cambridge South Station will arrive in 24-25. It's going to be the CSET public transport. And how do we make sure development on the existing campus is brought forward in line with the vision and governed by an overall master plan? And then finally, communicate and advocate on behalf of the campus. We have a residents engagement group. For example, residents have previously, where do they come when they want to talk to the campus? Where does GCP or the council come when they want to talk to one of the biggest employment sites in Cambridge? So communicating and advocating on behalf of the campus is their role. And that's this new organisation was formed in July. I'm currently leading it, and at the moment it's very much an organisation of its members. So it has one full-time, I'm 20%, it has one full-time employee currently with some administrators, and it brings together the expertise of the members, the different estates teams, different comms teams, the different HR groups in order to do these objectives. What it's done so far since its formation, it's got the 6 members, it's hosted within CUHP. We did work with the landowners to get a submission to the current local plan process, which is, for those of you who know, it's a planning process that happens every 10 years. In our area. It's included the allocation that we have in the first proposals is the only bit of sort of green belt edge development that has been included in the whole of Cambridgeshire. So that's a lot of work to get that into the submission. We are working on a transport strategy with the Greater Cambridge Partnership. We've actually received, it might surprise people, support from DULUP. We actually got some funding for the organisation to do this from the Department of Levelling Up, as it is recognised as a strategically important site in the country. And for those who might, enlivenment has been hard in this time, but there are some articles which are going up. But on Fridays there are now food vans and coffee carts on the Green and Gardens, which actually last Friday were being well enjoyed by lots of different people. Key next steps that we're trying to achieve this year is some early impact changes on the campus that improves wayfinding or signage in better ways. So how do people get around the campus? That's one of the common complaints, particularly from residents and visitors. So how do we have good and consistent signage? And how do we make sure we have a joint approach to Cambridge South Station and making sure that development is successful? As I said, a key thing for this year is to turn that vision into a much more concrete master plan of what do we want, how much of it, how much hotel, how much retail, how much conference space, how much life science space, how much hospital space, where is it all going to go, so that you do create a neighborhood with a city center, or a sort of center, not a city center obviously, but a sort of center and that works for people. And is that something that is economically viable and we can negotiate with landowners and development to get delivered? And where is the sum greater than the part? So where is it actually, how does it benefit the university and the hospital and ADCAM and AZ to cooperate in this rather than all just go off and do their own thing? We are entering into a partnership with a developer to help us do this and also to fund it. So, because obviously this is not something that we want to continually fund necessarily. And as I said, one of the really important parts this year is how do we improve as a neighbour. What some of my most uncomfortable meetings in the last year have been with our neighbours, listening to the impact of the campus on them, whether that's rubbish, traffic, smoking, parking, not getting a response, and actually how do we change that to being a real asset to our local communities. And why does it matter to CUH? Be interested to hear your views, but there's a number on this slide. I think our ability to attract and retain talent, some of the exit surveys when I speak to David, where it particularly below is the cost of housing and transport. It's one of the things we're looking to address on campus, but also about having, people tend to come for an interview and then get taken into the centre of Cambridge. How do we attract and retain talent? It's about sharing facilities. So how do we make sure that actually when AstraZeneca develop a very good nursery and cafe facilities, etc., how do we all benefit from that? And therefore not everybody has to develop their own facilities. It's about continuing to be able to attract companies to the campus where we can have innovative partnerships, some of that you're involved in. It's about actually getting the support of the UK government for the site as well. And the cases for Children's and Hospital, I don't know if Hugo might comment, are strengthened by the location of them on this site. It's also attractive to philanthropic partners, and making and then it says that planners will listen to our local population, but I think actually it's also about, and it's also about what we should be doing with our local population. And I think there's also for CUH particularly, who have a lot of land, there is opportunities to do better out of the current land if you think about how it works as part of the campus. So I will stop there.
Kristin-Ann, thank you for a really educational sort of talk on where we were and where we're hoping to get to. I'm sure there will be questions at the end, and that was really insightful. Thank you. What we'll do, I think, now is move on to Hugo, who, within the context of what we've heard in terms of an overall picture, is going to give us an update on the Cancer Hospital perspective, to be followed by Rob, who'll do the same from the Children's Hospital perspective. So, Hugo, over to you, and Tony, thanks for sharing the screen.
Thanks, Justin. Off we go, Tony. So this is just a sort of run through really where we've been to and where we are and where we're going to on the Cancer Hospital. So if you go to the next slide, Tony, thanks. So the current vision for the Cancer Hospital, as you probably all know, it's proposed to be a new build on the campus, on the car park opposite AstraZeneca. It's going to basically be a new home for oncology and haematology, inpatients and outpatients, plus some cancer diagnostics, particularly neurology and gynae oncology, for multidisciplinary clinics across most cancer disciplines, and it's going to have some additional MDT capacity. But I think the point to make is that it won't contain all CUH cancer services, and we've had to make some necessary compromises, which I can talk about in a minute. The next slide. So, of course, the original Cancer Hospital concept goes back to the 2020 vision, back in 2000 and about 2000, I think, actually, 2020 Vision first came out. And all of that went into abeyance after the financial crash in 2008, 2009, when the capital for the NHS basically dried up completely. So go back 10 years and really there was very little planned. At that time, we were desperate for capacity and for an upgrade of our outpatient facilities. So I asked Estates for a quote to do that, to give us some extra capacity. And they came back with £9 million, which even in those days was quite a lot of money. It was pretty evident that we weren't ever going to get that. And after some discussion, we thought it might be easier to find 100 million than it would be to find 10 million, because it would require obviously external funding. Having managed to suspend disbelief sufficiently to persuade people that was a good idea, we then originally brought forward a strategic outline case in 2014. And I should say, it was always pretty apparent that cancer and children's, which were quite often seen from outside as an either or, really had to be a both and, because they're both necessary developments for the campus. And the trouble was always trying to work out how on earth we could do that. And some of the compromises we've made have been partly related to the fact that this evolved as a sort of phased development, where we would try and give the trust the most of what it needed at that time, which is maximum inpatient capacity, which was basically could be delivered through children's, and then to deliver as much ambulatory capacity as we could for cancer, and things have sort of evolved from there. So originally we got the outline business case for the Cancer Hospital approved by the CUH board in July 2018. And that was based upon a partnership with the university, really aiming to deliver the most benefits we could from the incredibly powerful cancer research that we've got on the campus and in Cambridge generally, which is a very high proportion actually the University of Cambridge grant income. The CRUK Institute here is the biggest by funding of the CRUK institutes, or I'm not sure if it still is since the Crick opened, but certainly was until then. And Kristen Ann has alluded to some of the other great partners, as well as, of course, of AstraZeneca coming onto the campus. And that approach was very successful in terms of attracting interest nationally. And I think it's fair to say helped Children's Hospital to develop their academic part of their vision. But the Children's Hospital also came up with a really sound and strong proposal about mental health for children, which Rob will probably talk about. And that was very important, I think, locally. So, in fact, what happened, and just to explain, was that the Children's Hospital was announced as by Matt Hancock, who was then Secretary of State, before the Cancer Hospital, which threw everything to slight abeyance from the cancer side, because all the resources then were devoted, quite rightly, to getting the children's case off the ground. So cancer went quiet for a couple of years, but we continued to press the case and managed to get it back on the government agenda, thanks to Roland and others doing some fairly intensive lobbying. And that the Cancer Hospital was then announced in October 2020 by the Prime Minister. So since then, cancer and children's have really been moving in lockstep, although because of the sort of vagaries of where the money was originally allocated to come from, not necessarily in exactly the same way. But we are currently part of the new hospital programme, phase 2, which is actually really phase 1, because the phase 1 programmes are ones that are already well underway and in construction. So of the new schemes, there are only 9, I think, and we're one of those. So that's obviously very positive for us, and we've got a significant allocation of money yet to be finalised from central government to support it. So where we are at the moment, we had a new strategic outline case approved in December of last year, and we're just finalising the outline business case, which is really getting the final costings and designs and so on ready for for submission, which is due in June, although it may, for various reasons, go back to September of this year. Can I have the next slide, please? So the themes basically in the Cancer Hospital are a focus on cancer diagnostics, and particularly early diagnosis of cancer. And that really is work that probably won't mostly go on in the Cancer Hospital, but it's about developing new technologies and new approaches to early diagnosis of cancer. About what's called precision medicine, or really more precisely integrated cancer medicine, which is a combination of looking at how cancer evolves over time and how it can be targeted more precisely. And critical to whole vision is a deeper integration of clinical practice with this, with the research, and bring the research of the understanding of the basic science of cancer in to deliver tangible benefits for patients. We also want to create regional resources that will be a support for the whole region, particularly around workforce and training, and also around, for example, complex genomics, which increasingly, as more and more cancer patients have whole genome sequencing, it's going to be very important that we are able to interpret that and give proper advice so that the patient in Great Yarmouth can get the same advice as somebody in Cambridge. And that's something we're working with the GLH on, and the GMSA, which is the Genomic Medicine Service, to help to deliver. We already talked about industrial partnerships, and Kristin talked about AstraZeneca and Illumina and GE, all of whom we see as important partners going forward. And I think we can, as a result, offer probably a unique training offer for some doctors with a combination of scientific, clinical and industrial experience, which we hope will be attractive in terms of getting people into cancer, as it were. Next slide, please. So what's actually going to be in it? From the university side, 3 what are called institutes. One is an institute for the early detection of cancer, one is the Institute for Integrated Cancer Medicine, and one is a specific program for breast cancer. There's also going to be space for industrial partners, and AstraZeneca are taking space in the building, but really important, we're going to be having temporary dry lab space where small companies or academic partners can come in, develop a concept, in close patient proximity, and take it out again. Hopefully that will facilitate speeding up the pace of innovation. Next slide, please. And we've talked about, I've talked about what will be on the NHS side, but basically all single room accommodation. The inpatients will be oncology, hematology, transplant, teenage and young adults. Outpatient rooms, diagnostic procedures, some diagnostics, an expanded version of the cancer assessment unit, which we hope will help to take some of the pressure off, more pressure off the emergency department. Critically, we're focusing on more support for patients, so physio and rehab, psychological support, dietetic, nutrition support, and so on. That's going to be a key part of it. And the breast unit, which will be moved across, and then day chemotherapy and an ambulatory chemotherapy unit, particularly for delivering complex treatments and for induction for our transplant program. Next slide, please. So we hope the clinical benefits will be obviously the benefits of an improved environment, capacity, particularly for transplants. We're running really we have run out of capacity, and that's been exacerbated by COVID. And in order to deliver our commitments on cellular therapies, CAR T therapies and transplants, we need increased capacity, which this will deliver. We hope that the increased ambulatory setup will give us more opportunities for delivery in community and remotely, wherever that's appropriate. And as I said, we're hoping to support cancer pathway development regionally, along with workforce, precision medicine regionally, and really important to enhance access to clinical research for patients from around the whole region. Next slide, please. I suppose our core research aims will be to improve the proportion of patients who are diagnosed in an earlier stage, and that potentially has a huge national financial benefit because it costs much more to treat a patient with advanced cancer than it does one with early cancer. So that's, and nobody else in the country really is devoting significant effort to this, and it is the main plank of the NHS cancer plan. So we think this is an important strategic investment for the country, actually. We hope we'll be able to identify who will benefit from specific treatments and also who won't. You know, there may be people who don't need treatment and we're currently treating, and again, that's better for the system and better for them not to have those treatments. More access to trials and improved diagnostic pathways. So those are the sort of areas that we're really focusing on. Next slide, please. And so I feel at the moment like I'm about to take this shot. It looks all pretty good, but there's a lot of big bear pits on the way. The SOC's approved, as I said, the ABC is due for submission. All being well, we would be putting in the full business case, which is really the all systems go, in about a year's time from the submission of the ABC. If that is approved, we would aim to start building in late 24 and hopefully to open in early 26 if everything went absolutely swimmingly, which it may or may not do, but that's what we're aiming for. I think that's all. Yeah, so that's me. So thank you very much. We'll take questions at the end, I think.
Yeah, I think so, Hugo. Thank you very much for a very clear presentation and perhaps a very clear definition of something that's a marathon rather than a sprint. But that's really, really useful. Thank you. And I'm sure, as you say, there will be some questions at the end. So as promised, we'll move on to Rob Hirschkull now, please, who's our clinical director for the Cambridge Children's Hospital and a consultant paediatric gastroenterologist at CUH, who's going to kindly talk us through the Cambridge Children's Hospital. And Rob, thank you for joining us. We can't hear you, Rob.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
And more importantly, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so thanks very much for the invite. I'll try and keep this short. The presentation is very much in the same vein as Hugo's from the children's perspective to pitch to you some of the developments, some of the ideas and themes behind the Children's Hospital, and very much this is in the spirit of a marathon. I was sold my consultant job as a paediatric gastroenterologist here 13 years ago on the basis that a Children's Hospital was in the 5th strategic outline case that I enthusiastically took part, not realizing that I would be 13 years later working on the 7th proposition of a strategic outline case. So we're now in the outline business case, and certainly further than we've ever come before. So it is exciting to be part of that journey. So just to give you a heads up on the project, why Children's, and I apologize for those of you who've heard me drone on before about why we need this. But just as for many of our adult services, we provide specialist pediatric services for the region. 3/4 of our activity that we're providing currently are specialist services, so only a small number of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough children come to us. The vast majority are for specialist services. That's something that's absolutely transformed over the last decade, with us providing specialist services like essentially the children's hospitals in London, but in a very different type of way. So if you happen to have a child with a chronic complex disease, and you can see how old this slide is, nothing's changed since there were loads of fields around. You had a tortuous and painful journey making your way to various pediatric facilities around the campus. The only region, sadly, that got missed out in the grand building of children's hospitals is the East of England. So no dedicated specialty hospital for children. So we've got a local issue, we've got a regional issue, and I think it won't have escaped anyone that we've got a serious mental health issue Even before COVID, that was a problem for children and young people. It has become a serious problem, obviously through COVID. And we had that in mind 4 or 5 years ago when it became clear that the inpatient Ida Darwin regional unit for children with mental health disorders over in Fulbourn was listed to close. And we began putting our heads together to say, look, it doesn't make any sense to park mental health facilities away from physical health and all the challenges that brings. And I'm happy to talk more about that, but separating out eating disorders children from gastroenterology or medically unexplained symptoms and treating them purely medically without considering mental health is getting ever more of a problem. So our big, push with this hospital over the last 3 or 4 years has been that we're going to integrate the care and facilities and design of the building to encompass both children with severe mental health disorders, but also physical health disorders. In addition to that, we, just as Hugo outlined for cancer, we have focused on embedding the sort of brilliance of research opportunities within the hospital. 5,000 square meters of the 35,000 square meter build will be dedicated to broadly 6 themes of research, those that map pretty directly onto the top causes of death and disability in children. The UK doesn't do fantastically well in health outcomes for children when we're stacked up against other European countries. So we've certainly got some catch up to do, but I guess we play to Cambridge's strengths with particularly genomic medicine, but also the perinatal research capability in the Rosie Hospital with Gordon Smith, the focus on diabetes and obesity, much of which originates in childhood, as well as the opportunities that childhood cancer research on the campus brings. Infection and inflammation is a strength of the broader campus and the wider university. And then there is a serious chunk of mental health research opportunities where early intervention has for at least a decade now been shown in children with adverse early life events to impact on physical health as adults. And we're simply not addressing it. So there is an opportunity for coming together in dealing with mental health disorders early in childhood and certainly in adolescence that impacts on both adult function as in education and the workplace, but also in dealing with many of the physical health presentations that they deal with in adults, whether that is obesity, cardiovascular disease, and so on. So this is the first sort of small pick of the model. That's all we could afford at this stage. To build, in fact, I'm down here in Chelmsford with the model begging tonight for money to support the Children's Hospital mission, but it's a ground floor and basement research facility that will be embedded right at the front of the hospital. And I'll show you a few pictures in a second, but very much up front and central in our mission. So we bring together the hospital now with physical and mental health. Of course, it's children and families at the center, but very much on the understanding, and I'm going to show you how small this thing is shortly, that we want to keep children close to home, close to their regional units, in the environment that they're used to, and preferably we want to do that with the help of research, medical technology, and the sort of digital capabilities that we hope are going to stop families having to drive up to Cambridge and queue for parking. You've seen some slides already. This is the long earmarked slot for the Children's Hospital. So I've got a couple of slides about the challenges of connecting into the rest of the campus, but we very much expect to join up with the Rosie Hospital and the neonatal intensive care unit that obviously makes use of pediatric facilities. So it's a busy slide to outline the scope that we've got to. This is a facility that by quite a large margin is the smallest children's hospital in the UK, with 72 beds for physical health and 30 for mental health patients. I'll show you on the next slide that it's a pretty minimal increase. However, the gains that we get from co-locating ourselves, getting out of the imaging facility, being able to co-locate theatres with day cases, increases our productivity by almost 50% in the life of this core model and the proposition. So I'll show you shortly how we co-locate our facilities, but we have had to pare this down, and the model that I showed you is essentially modeled through to 2034-35. We think we can accommodate the growth in demographics. I mean, driving down here to Essex, at every corner there is a new housing development with young people and young families moving in. So to incorporate the growth of demographics is a serious challenge. To do this, we need, we're trying to keep it under 400 million, we need 370 to 375 million to build round about 35,000 square meters. And you can work out that more or less £10,000 per square meter is what you need to raise to build in Cambridge or on our campus. We're asking the government 250 for 250 million, having been promised by Matt Hancock 100 million. There's 20 million from selling the Ida Darwin site to Homes England. And we are actually today, we will hear, I think we are a reasonable way on our way to 100 million in philanthropy, as well as a decent contribution for the local educational authority to include a school, which is a requirement for certainly for children with sort of long-standing chronic complex disorders in hospital. So I pulled this out just to showcase how small and how I think efficient and focused we've been on keeping this hospital small so that we keep kids at home. And a lot of effort has gone into pathway work and understanding how we can manage kids at arm's length, keeping the bed number down, a small increase in day cases, a long-awaited pediatric emergency theatre. I mean, it's only 5 years away, but the sort of opportunity that I think we cannot do without in a functioning children's hospital. And of course, some of this will require duplication of staff, of leadership, of senior people in a separate box. And that has implications for revenue, for workforce, for recruitment, and for the affordability of the building. But if you provide this sort of facility, there is going to be on cost. Sadly, this particular phase of the offer doesn't include outpatients. We're ever hopeful that an acute build will bring pediatric outpatients next to a pediatric hospital. I get daily abuse from my colleagues, some of whom are probably on this call, about finishing their career in a porter cabin, which I've certainly resigned myself to. There's no dedicated office space in the hospital. It'll be hot desking and available for all clinical staff around to do their business in the building, but we'll need to provide accommodation elsewhere on the campus. And then the core facilities remain on the campus. So connecting into the hospital has become an increasing issue. We thought initially that the 2020 so-called land was going to be opened up as part of the master plan. Of course, there is no money for the master plan. So the best possible solution, which I gather is £25 million worth of solution, is a long bridge taking us from the level 3 patient corridor outside main theatres across past the Rosie, dipping somehow into the neonatal unit, and then hooking into level 2 of the children's hospital, which would be the same theatre hot floor. Needless to say, money's tight. So our current working option is the so-called enhanced tunnel option, which requires particularly the ED patients to travel along the top of the patient corridor, down either a lift or, if you must, along the level 2 patient corridor, visitor corridor, up the Rosie ramp, through the Rosie, down under the Rosie, through a patient suitable tunnel under the road, and then pop up in the children's hospital. So much in the vein of the Cancer and Papworth hospitals, who started out imagining tunnels, bridges were possible, ending up with functional tunnels. And I think that's where we're likely to end up, although the amount of traffic that we will get in the public spaces is a challenge. So just a couple of pictures to finish with. A lot of fantastic work's been done by the design team, 2 sets of architects, one from Scandinavia with mental health experience and Hawkins Brown from the UK. An enormous amount of work from families and children around the region has gone into the design, not only the initial principles, but also in supporting the development of priorities around the campus. And then just to walk you through what the hospital will contain, on the ground floor, we have our intensive care unit alongside a school and the research institute. The second floor is the hot floor with theatres, the cancer unit, the day units, imaging, and a bridge to somewhere, someday. And in the top floor, integrated mental and physical health wards. And just to show you what the aspiration is, which to be honest, still fills quite a lot of people with trepidation. You have a mental health end of the ward. Of course, all these are rooms that are single with en suites. You have an area where you could accommodate the sort of particularly challenging mental health and physical health combination patients. And we do have some of those that are currently accommodated on the pediatric wards, and then a predominantly physical health ward down the other end. So one floor, we hope, and one wing will be likely dedicated to more adolescent patients. Another end might be younger children. Where next, we had planning approval for both phases of this. So out the back of phase 1, in some point in the future, there is planning for phase 2 to expand this after 2035. We're working hard at the fundraising, without which this is not going to happen. We're lobbying hard to get into that new hospital program. We have an OBC submission together, and I think it does make the campus case much stronger. A joint submission with cancer in the autumn, most likely. And we are still ever hopeful that spade in the ground time will be 2024. And a couple of images from submitted to planning, that's what you should one day see opposite the Rosie in that square. Thanks, Justin, and everyone else who's still awake and with us. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Rob. Very much appreciated. And, I think what we've heard in the last 50 minutes is a testament to a huge amount of work from many, many people, but a potentially very exciting half a decade or decade ahead of us in terms of development, not just from the 2 bills we've heard about, but also on a wider scale from Kristen Ann's presentation initially. So that was really very, very helpful. If anyone has any questions, could you either put them in the chat for me, please, or raise your hand? I can't see any at the moment. Does anyone have any burning questions to ask any of our speakers? If not, I'll just start by asking perhaps Rob and Hugo to start with about how a bit more about how you see the Cambridge builds in your specialties, really linking in with the sort of ICS, sort of locally with our sort of North colleagues, with more locally, but then regionally and wider. And presumably those are pathways that are potentially working now, or will they be completely different? I don't know who might want to comment on that.
Well, it's a great question, Justin, to which I don't have any answers, but I've got some, suggestions. I mean, we are, of course, talking to the ICS. It's to be honest, a bit of a troubling challenge, knowing that you have a further set of sign-offs and agreements for projects that are regional, predominantly regional, with the debt in many ways being carried by a local organization, or relatively local organization. So we're working hard with providers around the region to get letters of support, to understand that this is going to benefit them. I'm not really clear about the sort of power of the sign-off for the shadow ICS, but we are very much engaged in keeping up to speed and showing our homework to when it comes to signing off some debt.
Hugo, anything else from your perspective?
Well, yeah, the difficulty, as Rob says, is that we've got multiple stakeholders that we have to try and please, all of whom have slightly different agendas, and all of whom have to agree. Otherwise, any one of whom can stop either of these projects pretty dead. So, my view would be that the Children's Hospital is very much a regional proposition, as Rob's lined down. It's really a necessity in terms of children's services in the region. The Cancer Hospital, as I said, has a very strong national focus as well in terms of the research agenda. But in terms of how we get the region on board, it's really about how we can democratize some of the excellence that is available on campus. And as I say, spread it out into the various. We already have a fairly devolved model of cancer care compared to many areas. We don't bring as many people onto campus for chemotherapy as most other cancer centres. We have radiotherapy already in Peterborough, Ipswich, Norwich, Southend. So there's quite devolved cancer care already, and we don't propose to change that. And I think what our sort of proposal is to the region is, look, we will spread the excellence. We're going to try and improve the sustainability of the workforce, in addition to providing a genuine regional resource. As Rob says, our system is particularly challenging because there are a lot of not necessarily competing, but I think it's fair to say that as an entire Cambridge St Peters system, we're not quite sure where we're going yet. And the ICS is obviously nascent therefore it's a little way off developing its strategy. At the same time, for cancer, most of our payers are through strategic commissioning. So we have a relatively small number of people of CCG amount of money CCG will have to pay. So really for us, it's focusing on the region because the specialist commissioners have to foot the bill. I think it's different for children's because I think they have quite a lot of CCG work as well, and that's therefore very important for them. But the challenge is keeping all these stakeholders happy when they all want slightly different things.
Interesting, thank you. I don't know if there's anyone else wants to comment on that. I'm not seeing any at the moment. Questions come through. How does pathology fit in the longer term vision? Many of the clinical and research programs need human samples if we're to develop and deliver personalized medicine. And this will need samples, particularly tissue, to get into any laboratory quickly. It seems a big lost opportunity to put a histopathology lab in the Cancer Hospital, as that's a major part of the work.
Well, Stephen, I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, as I said, we've had to really be limited in our aspirations. We're not even having radiotherapy in the Cancer Hospital, for example, which is also a big, medium-term problem for us. Having said that, what is really important is that we develop tissue pathways with not only CCR and the Cancer Hospital, but also other hospitals in the region. We do have quite exciting plans for development of histopathology and also of the GLH, which I hope side by side, and if we can manage to get those either co-located or working very closely together in better sized facilities, I think that will work. I don't think it would be very good to have histopathology right next to, because it makes the tissue pathway easier, but of course histopathology serves a much bigger region than just us, and so it's important to get them working wherever they come from, particularly with the increase in requirement for sequencing, which does at the moment still require frozen tissue.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Hugo. I'm aware that it's getting close to 7 o'clock. I'm also aware that it's been great that Mike Moore, our chair, has joined us. And I know Mike's got some experience and input from the regional perspective. So Mike, you want to comment on that aspect? That's really kind of you to join us again. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I've never seen Rob look so smart, but I know you're in Essex bidding for money, Rob, so good to see it. I mean, first of all, can I just say, I think for Chris and Anne, obviously the journey around CBC is a kind of very much of the moment and is something that's in our power. For Rob and Hugo, I mean, I take my hat off to the strength of the clinical thinking, the clinical modelling that the teams have been working on for a long time. And I personally have never known a time where a government announcement about funding can happen and it still take forever and such degrees of uncertainty as to bringing it to fruition. So I really want to commend the quality of the thinking of the teams and the patience and forbearance. It does take. I also share Rob and Hugo's view that I think actually that we're as near as we've ever been, and the next steps are going to continue to be important. I think on the regional piece, I mean, I very much agree with what Hugo and Rob have said. Of course, the ICS will be in legislative being in 2 months' time, and so it will be a signing off process. I mean, that's clear. And we've been working with colleagues there to try and make sure they understand it. I think there is a wider thing, which is that I know Rob and Hugo are working this through at different ways, and I know other colleagues are working it through, which is that we still have a degree of kind of nervousness in other parts of the region about what they see as the Cambridge-centred nature of investment. And it was really quite a battle 3 or 4 years ago to persuade other colleagues in Norfolk and Essex and Hertfordshire that this was a good thing. I think that, and I think as Sue Broster knows, Sue's working in a world where specialist commissioning still allows far too much stuff to go towards London. And that's strategically a bad thing, and it's a bad thing for patients. If a patient's living in Wymondham in Norfolk and being transferred to London for treatment when they don't need to go that far, that's not good for patients. But that's an historic legacy that we've still got in mindset. And I think it's going to be behoven to all of us to continue to assure colleagues across the region that all these things are good things and that we as a region should have the courage of more specialist commissioning being provided within the region. I don't mean everything. If you're in the southern part of the region in St Albans or you're in South Essex, of course your patients are going to naturally look towards London. That's absolutely right. But too much of it is taken outside of the region. And so we've still got we've still got the continued charm offensive and engagement and discussion with our colleagues across Suffolk and Norfolk and Essex. That's still a really important part, that we need to understand that people can be sceptical about Cambridge.
Thanks, Mike. I think that's it's a really important point, and actually, I think in many ways a positive point to end on, because we know the work we need to do there, and I can. It's clear from tonight we've got all the right people in minds to try and embody that and bring people with us on this collective, collaborative journey, which is what it's about. So. Thank you all, and particularly thank you to Kristen and Hugo and Rob for talking. I'll send dates around for our research symposium based forum next month. Do put that in your diaries. We've got a really fantastic lineup of speakers with Miles Parks and Charlotte Rutter and Richard Gilbertson and Raj talking to us as well. So it's going to be a really exciting session. So I'll send that around. But thanks for joining us this evening, and thanks to the speakers. Bye-bye.